Chess. Where does it come from? Why is it called that? And if this piece is so clearly a little horsey, then why do people insist on calling it a knight? I will answer all these questions and more in the next 15 to 20 minutes. Let's start with the board. Chess got its board, along with almost everything else, from the ancient 6th century Indian board game of chaturanga. Though while it did have the familiar 8x8 shape, some differences are still quite apparent. For example, all of the squares are actually the same color. In fact, it wasn't until the late 10th century that people started adding alternating dark and light squares to chessboards. I would have assumed that this was because of influence from the somewhat similar game checkers, given the fact that the two games are played on the same board, and that this pattern is literally called checkered. But no, this is not actually the case. In fact, checkers actually got its modern board from chess. The original checkers board looked more like this. I'm sure you've also noticed that the board for chaturanga has markings on it. These were passed down from an even ancienter game, Ashtapada. This was a race game where the goal was to get to the middle squares, and all of the marked squares were safe. While these squares were briefly passed into chess, they did not last very long. Now let's talk about the king. One of the key things that set chaturanga apart from other board games of the time, and one of the key things that it passed down to the modern chess, is that the fate of the entire game rests on just one piece, the king. The king in chaturanga actually had the exact same moveset that it has in chess today, one step in any direction. It is possible that in an earlier version of the game, that it could only move orthogonally, given the movement of the general in Chinese shang qi. You could win the game by checkmating the king, aka attacking their king and leaving them no possible escape. But you could also win the game by bearing the king, which is where you capture all of your opponent's pieces, leaving them with only a king. Of course, this does often lead to a win in today's chess, but it would also sometimes lead to a stalemate, which is a draw. However, in chaturanga, stalemate was actually considered to be a loss for the player that delivered it. The king was so important to the game of chess that it is actually the source of its name. You might think that chess comes from its ancestor, chaturanga, given that they both start with ch, but this is not the case. The Sanskrit chaturanga means having four limbs, representing the four divisions of an army: elephantry, chariotry, cavalry, and infantry. And this became the Persian chatrang, which passed into Arabic as shatranj, which went through Andalusia to become the Spanish ajedrez and the Portuguese xadrez, which also reflects the path chess took as it spread to Europe. Instead, chess comes from when it was being played by the Persians, who would say Shah mat, meaning the king is amazed, when they checkmated their opponent's king. This passed into the Arabic Shah mat, which was reinterpreted as Shah matta, meaning the king is dead. This passed into languages in Europe, including Old French, which gave English words like checkmate, check, chess, as well as checkers, checks and balances, checkmark, body check, and pay the check. It might not have given chess its name, but another important piece is the queen. Though the queen wasn't always known as the queen. In chaturanga, it was called the minister or the general, and its moveset was completely different from the queen we know today, only being able to move one step diagonally. In Persian shatranj, it became the furs, meaning counselor or advisor. The piece slowly evolved into representing a queen, and in 15th century Spain got a massive buff by acquiring its modern moveset, making it perhaps one of the most OP pieces in board game history, second only to the super mega checker that can teleport anywhere and capture everything that your brother would always insist on using. It's possible this powerful queen was actually inspired by actual IRL queens ruling Europe at the time, like Eleanor of Aquitaine and Isabella I of Castile. She may also be inspired by the Virgin Mary, troubadour tradition, or just simply the fact that when it comes to chess, women and men were able to play on equal ground. Nevertheless, far more is known about the history of the queen than is known about the bishops. The bishops come from a piece in chaturanga called the elephant. We aren't exactly sure how the elephant originally moved, as 3 different moves have been recorded in the literature. One possibility is moving 2 spaces in any diagonal direction, jumping over any pieces in the way, which is the same as its descendant piece, the alfil, in Persian shatranj, Ethiopian centaurej, Mongolian Tamerlane chess, and medieval courier chess. This is also the same move as the boat in Indian chaturanga, a 4-player game that is often seen as a variant of chaturanga. It's also similar to the moves of the horse in Chinese xiangqi and the elephant in Korean janggi. Another possibility is 1 step straight forward or 1 step in any diagonal direction, which was described by this guy, al-Biruni, around the year 1030, and is the same as that of the nobleman in Thai makruk and the elephant in Burmese citoyen, as well as the silver general in Japanese shogi. The last possibility is 2 squares in any orthogonal direction, jumping over any pieces in the way, like the dababa, or even kinda similar to how the elephant moves in chaturanga. All of these possible movements fit well with the idea of war elephants breaking the lines of the enemy. The elephant piece was depicted with 2 tusks, which got reinterpreted as an archer in Czechoslovakia, a jester with a cap in France and Romania, and a bishop with a mitre in England. It's actually possible that the bishop comes from Iceland, as Icelandic actually calls this piece biskup, which actually predates the English bishop. Plus, the 12th century Lewis Chessman set, which unequivocally depicts this piece as a bishop, is thought to potentially be from Iceland. Still, this might just be wishful thinking on my part. A piece that is far simpler than the bishop, at least in its history, are the knights. The knights are descended from the horse in chaturanga, which had the same moveset with its ability to jump over pieces, representing the ability of the cavalry to quickly flank enemy lines. In many languages, the knight is still called the horse, and is still depicted as such in most chess sets. In England, it came to be known as the knight, reflecting its role on the battlefield as cavalryman on a horse and not just the steed itself, as well as reflecting a shift from chess representing a battlefield to coming to represent the royal court of which knights were a part. But because the shape of the piece had been standardized as a horse by the Staunton chess sets, there came to be a bit of a disconnect between the piece and its name, just like the rooks. The rooks come from the chariot in chaturanga, which passed into Persian shatranj. It had the same orthogonal movement of the modern rook. The name comes from the Persian ruh, which means chariot. For those of you who haven't seen Persian war chariots, which for your sake I hope is all of you, they were these towering behemoths that were heavily armored and made to look like stone. That's why the rook came to look more and more like a crenellated stone tower, while preserving the Persian name rook. I'll admit, this type of movement makes a lot more sense from a chariot than it does for a castle. Most castles I've seen don't really move that much. Of course, things got even more complicated in the 15th century when a new move was given to the rook and the king, and was given the name of castling. Now let's talk about quite possibly the most complicated piece in all of chess: the pawns. The pawns are descended from the infantrymen in chaturanga, which moved 1 step directly forward and captured 1 step diagonally forward, just like the pawns today. The word pawn comes from the Old French paon, meaning foot soldier, and is also the source of the word peon. The name of the chess piece was subsequently the source of the use of the word pawn to mean one who is manipulated by someone else, given how weak and prone to being sacrificed the piece is in chess. It is unsure how promotion worked in chaturanga, and we have multiple different theories. Some people argue that pawns always had to promote to the minister, the predecessor to the modern queen, that could only move one square diagonally. Other people argue that pawns could only promote to the piece that had been on their file, and only after that piece had been captured. It was only later that pawns were allowed to promote to any piece upon reaching the other side of the board, around the same time that a rule was added allowing pawns to move 2 squares on their first move, and subsequently the infamous en passant. Speaking of special moves like en passant, let's talk about the strategy. We can see how worldly of a game chess is by the names of the different terms chess players use. After all, what other game has a move with a French name, a move with an Italian name, a move with an Italian name, a move with a Spanish name, a rule with an Italian name, a unit of time with an Italian name, a situation with a German name, another situation with a German name, a clock with a German name, a type of mistake with a German name, a type of tournament with a German name, a type of check with a German name, a move with a German name, a variant with a German name, a square with a German name, a type of player with a German name. What, me? A type of piece with a French name, a type of mate with a French name, an announcement with a French name, Gardez, another announcement with a French name, Jedub, another announcement with a French name, Remy, a variant with a French name, a type of spectator action with a Yiddish name.
Knight to e4.
Knight to e4 would be good here. A type of tactic with a Russian name, a rule with a Bulgarian name, a part of an opening with an Arabic name, an opening with an English name from a French word, from a Spanish word, from an Italian phrase, an Arabian mate, a Basque system, a Swiss tournament, a Greek sacrifice, an English opening, a Budapest gambit, a Dutch defense, a Scandinavian defense, a Sicilian defense, a French defense, a Vienna game, a Scotch game, a Slav defense, a Catalan opening, an Indian defense, an Indian bishop, an Italian game, an Italian bishop, a Spanish opening, and a Spanish bishop, and probably a lot of other stuff I missed for you to tell me about in the comments. People started getting strategic with chess right away. After all, it was seen as a battle simulation. The pieces represented the 4 arms of a military, both in how they looked and how they moved. Chess strategy showed your abilities as a general and a leader. We found a book on Shang-Chi by the Chinese emperor from 569, chess problems from the Caliph of Baghdad from 840, a work from the 10th century Abbasid court companion that takes a scientific approach to chess strategy, and a book from the King of Castile that includes various chess problems. In the 1300s, there was even an emperor of the Turco-Mongol Empire who created his own variant of chess with a larger board and way more piece types. Chess then left these kingly courts and began to be played by the common people, and was seen as not just a tool of military strategy, but a game and an art form. In the 19th century, chess entered its romantic era, where players emphasized bold moves and sacrifices, around the same time that an English guy first suggested that white should always move first. Racist. In the 20th century, chess became seen as more analytical, a manifestation of genius and not creativity. During the Cold War, chess also became a symbol for the clash between the United States and the Soviet Union, culminating in the match of the century, the 1972 World Chess Championships, that took place between Bobby Fischer of the US and Boris Spassky of the USSR in Reykjavik, Iceland. And in 1997, world champion Garry Kasparov lost to the computer Deep Blue, marking a shift towards chess engines and online play that one could argue dates all the way back to the 1845 chess game by telegraph and the 1769 Mechanical Turk, though in this case, Deep Blue did not secretly have a guy inside controlling it. This brings us to the future of chess. Chess has evolved a lot from its days in 5th century India as chaturanga, and has spawned a bajillion different games along the way, from chaturanga, shatranj, xiangqi, shogi, and jangi, to makruk, sintarej, and sitian. People are making games with more players, different rules, different pieces, different boards, time travel, and just about anything else you can think of. Do I think that FIDE is going to add 5D chess with multiverse time travel to official tournaments? No. But chess has changed before, and I'm sure the future has a lot in store. I also want to show you a lovely chart of what different languages call chess, check, checkmate, and all the different pieces. Let me also color code it so you can see the different groups, like languages that call it some variant of the Persian Shah, or languages that still call the bishop the elephant. Take a few moments to really take it all in. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like. And if that last bit about all these different chess variants got you excited, well, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss my next video where I'm actually going to check some of them out. I don't just talk about chess, I've also got a ton of videos about Scrabble, linguistics, and a bunch of other stuff. So make sure to stay tuned. And have a nice day!